Hey, everybody, welcome once again to Inside the Matrix. Today, we are honored to have back on the show a brilliant researcher and author, Elana Freeland. She was on with us, I think it was late August last year, but so much has happened then. And Elana has a new book out, and we want to talk to her about that. But Elana, welcome back to the show. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks, Jimmy, for having me.
Um, let's start out I'm sure most of our listeners are going to be familiar with you, but for those who aren't, let's go back to, I think it was 2014, when your first book came out, and let's just, kind of bring our listeners up to date about what's going on, what was happening then and what's happening now.
Well, back in 2012, 2 years before the book came out, I was a new kid on the block when it came to chemtrails and geoengineering. And there was a wonderful conference in Los Angeles called Consciousness Beyond Chemtrails. And the guy, John White, who sponsored the whole thing, did an amazing amount of work. He'd invited all the luminaries of the so-called internet anti-geoengineering movement, at that time anti-chemtrails. And so I got to meet everybody who was really somebody in doing a lot of work of their own. And one of the greats that I met there, of course, Clifford Carnicom was there. He was a friend of mine already because he's the independent scientist who really did the lion's share of work on what was falling from the chemical trails from jets in northern New Mexico back then. He'd been working on that since the late 90s and collecting precipitation and doing analysis, microscope and chemical analyses of just what the heck this stuff was, because it wasn't a contrail, as people really don't realize. There are no contrails anymore. Maybe in a tiny plane, there might be some contrails, but not anything that requires fuel. So I had, in 2012, I had done that work of going to the conference, meeting all these people, and then coming away. And Adam Parfrey at Feral House, my publisher of the first two books, had asked me if I could write a book on chemtrails. So I set to work, and with Clifford's help, was able to deconstruct a very important patent, 1987 patent, regarding the experimentation going on with HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project up in Gakona, Alaska, in which they were trying to penetrate the ionosphere and pull ions down into the lower atmosphere for a lot of wireless activity. And the particles that were being distributed up in the stratosphere by jets, rockets, drones were exceedingly important to keeping the atmosphere ionized and battery ready, you might say, antenna ready for all the wireless activity of the military industrial intelligence complex. Of course, we were given the iPhone, the cell phone by then. We had a lot of wireless technologies that were very convenient, giving us lots of comfort and entertainment. And it really hadn't occurred to the public to realize that all of this wireless technology was really about the military industrial intelligence complex and its agendas going far into the future. And so I really knew next to nothing then. We deconstructed the patent by Bernard Eastland. I had a chapter on Clifford Carnicom's work with Morgellons. I was meeting a lot of Morgellons people who were having these lesions occur on their skin and a gel-like substance coming out, without getting too gross, and some color-coded wires, bizarrely enough, like black, red, and I want to say blue. So I knew a few things, but I had no idea how far reaching this program really was, what we were seeing. We were seeing the beginnings of it. and the Morgellons and the heavy metals, all in nanoparticles, were falling from the heavens. I thought initially, wow, they need this for ionizing the atmosphere. So um, maybe this is just the fallout, and we're the uh, the useless eaters down below that have to breathe this stuff in, eat it in our foods, drink it in our water, and that's the way it is. And maybe they're looking for some other way to do this without spreading all this particulate matter. Well, I eventually found out, no, that's not what's going on. But that was mainly in the second book that I found that out. So by 2014, I had written Chemtrails, HARP, and the full spectrum dominance of planet Earth. And I knew that full spectrum dominance, that's a military doctrine, was exceedingly important to all of it. And I realized that full spectrum, it meant the electromagnetic spectrum, because our little vantage point in the spectrum is just so tiny, it's kind of pathetic,
Right.
because it
Yeah, we
goes
only see
way out.
little bit of what's actually there, right?
Yes, it's like we're so proud of these five senses, but the truth is they don't take us very far when it comes to invisible electromagnetic waves, or particles that are also waves, particles, waves. So it's the invisible realm that is at stake now and is front and center. And it's not what the population has really been prepared for. A lot of people may have a little microscope that they can use, or they're good observers still. Very few Americans believe in their perceptions anymore, other than what the news and media tell them to believe. So it was obvious that the invisible realm was being developed in some way. And I knew very little even the second book, I knew very little about nanoparticles, but it kept coming up. And so I began to research it. Just as in the first book, Clifford Carnicom had recommended a book on plasma physics that was very good for a layperson like me. I had a biology background in undergrad, but I didn't have physics or chemistry. That was my father's field, and I had avoided it assiduously. So I began to really dig into all this stuff, and found that it wasn't an arduous, oh, geez, I have to read. No, not at all. I was like, wow, it's like it all started opening up to me on my own, no classes, no PhDs to condition me to think a certain way. And so by the time I wrote the second book, which came out in 2018, I had actually finished it in 2016, but Adam Parfrey of Feral House sort of sat on it for a year. And that book was called Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown. And it was that book that Billy Hayes, the famous HARP man, Billy had been programmed by MK Ultra from the time he was a child to be super good in electromagnetics, because he was on over, I think Billy said, over 240 or 50 projects run by the CIA, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. They're all sort of the same ilk, all over the world, building these phased array antennas for drawing energy down from the ionosphere, projecting energy up into space, etc. So Billy heard me on Coast to Coast after the first book came out, and guided me all the way through to seeing, look over here, Elana, at the space fence. And what the space fence was at that time, the population was calling it, I think, the same term, smart grid. The smart grid. Yes, everything was being made wireless, and we didn't realize. Many people didn't. I kind of did pretty much when I began the second book, that we were being enclosed in it, and that it was going to be a lockdown on the human brain, on possibly our genetics, And so already that idea occurred to me in the second book. So that book pretty much technically describes the space fence and all the dual use technology. That's a military term. It means that you can use it for military things or for civilian things. All the dual use technology was being set up to control life, yes, all of life, but also the human being. So that book came out in 2018. And that book gave birth to my thinking about synthetic biology and the relationship between what we're breathing in, eating, drinking, and what we're being vaccinated with for the lovely little human beings just arriving in the world who are just pelted with vaccines. I realized that really there were three systems that were being used to distribute, deliver certain nanotech into our bodies and brains. And so it was the chemtrails, the chemical trails of jets, rockets, and drones. It was the GMO foods. I don't know what people don't understand about that term, genetically modified foods, and thinking that it's okay to eat those and you'll be just fine and hunky-doky healthy. No, you won't. There are hardly any nutrients in it. It's synthetic food. 26 nations in the world have made it a felony to even bring GMOs into the country, much less to grow it inside the nation's boundaries. So somehow the United States and other countries have missed the boat on that. It's similar to how many people still have microwave ovens with magnetrons in them. And magnetrons are weapon systems. I don't know, am I on another planet or something that people are not really understanding what this means? Yes, that's right. That's how we've been raised. Everybody's watching I Love Lucy and the being entertained and thinking of cool stuff to own that does cool, amazing physics that they have no desire to learn. We need to really get out of that mindset because it's literally killing us. So I was able to then look into the vaccines, which is the third delivery system. And of course, what happens at the time that I'm writing this book a couple of years ago, lo and behold, we have this huge event called COVID-19. And now all over the internet are doctors, and mostly young doctors, but older doctors as well, researchers, PhDs, all beginning to look deeply into what is going on, because what the great surprise was not that big pharma would make its big move to completely control all of humanity, but that people would buy into it so docilely, so acquiescing like programmed robots, lining up for experimental jabs that there are masses of side effects to, and people are dropping dead from. So there was a lot to learn there. And so the book was later than I thought, because I really had to sit here and listen to hours and hours of these people talking and look at their analysis and compare it with some other things I knew and look up things. It was a study, a long 2.5-year study is what I did to write the third book, which has just come out. And I'm all in a flurry right now because there's so much going on. We're constantly running out of books. And I left Feral House after the second book. Adam Parfrey, who was sort of my touchstone there, had died. And the Feral House was moving in a different direction. But I left on very friendly terms. They did a fabulous job in the first two books. It's just I wanted a little more money per book. And I decided to do it myself. And boy, has it been a lot of work. I now have a great appreciation for publishers, but still, I will make a bit more. So that book just came out 2 weeks ago, if that. and already I'm having trouble with Amazon. And there are some things happening that are a little more than just normal fallout, because it is pretty much the book for what's happened up to now. And there's so much more to add. I mean, I can't keep writing the book like in a science fiction story or anything.
Of course.
But it's called Geoengineered Transhumanism: How the Environment Has Been Weaponized by Chemicals, Electromagnetism, and Nanotechnology for Synthetic Biology. And it's a long title, but the book is longer. The book is 690 pages long. Wow. And has 60 illustrations in it. I attempted to give people the keys to the kingdom when it comes to how the environment has been epigenetically used, exploited, to make it so that we are literally completely entrapped outside our bodies in a smart city concept of the atmosphere, the earth, the forests, natural life in general, and inwardly, inside our bodies, the molecular model of our biology has been converted and is being converted to digital biology. And this is a huge, huge thing, because what it means is there is no contagion. If ever there was, there is not now. There is no virus. There is no bacteria. These components are all genetic flotsam and jetsam that the cell is attempting to get rid of. On the other hand, there is the possibility of what is being done to weaponize some of these natural ingredients, to turn the natural into synthetic, and then use it, place a gain of function on it, and make it into something that can be used as a weapon for chemical and biological warfare. So this is what's going on. We have the biggest experiment in history now, much bigger than any other pogrom or pandemic of the past. And this one's complex because it's multi-layered. There are several things going on with these inoculations. And one of which is entirely genetic, to change the human genome into something other, into what I'm calling a transhuman, which could also be called a hybrid human. And the other is to implant in the people who choose to be inoculated other diseases, not necessarily the molecular reconstituted synthetic virus or bacteria, but enough of a frequency that it could be called forth by a remote system of 5G, 6G. 5G being a sort of hopping from 1 millimeter wave outlet to another, 6G being the penetration into matter in order to get it way inside. So this is very concerning, to say the least, because I don't know if I told you, Jimmy, but I'm a student of Rudolf Steiner for many years. I was a Waldorf teacher for years, and he 100 years ago said, as Dr. Tom Cowan and Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt have quoted, he said that there would come a vaccine one day created that would, you take it and you no longer think of spiritual things. You no longer can even self-reflect on who you are, what you're doing. Should you do this? Should you do that? No, you are now basically somewhat robotic and responding to your master's voice from some remote location that is triggering your will, not just diseases in you, but your will inside of you. So I really feel that this might be it, or at least the beginning of it. and that it's all hands on deck now. It's give it everything you've got, because humanity, while we think, oh yeah, it'll just go on, it doesn't matter what we do, we're just little individuals, we're not running this world as we see. No, it's not. It doesn't work like that. It works in a different way, and so every individual counts for what they are committing their time, energy, intent, love to. It isn't time anymore to sit back and relax and wait for a Gandhi or a Martin Luther King or someone to save us. Those days are over. This is now, every human being is called to defend humanity and the future of humanity. So that's kind of why I wrote this long tome on technology. I talk in the first part, in the first 7 chapters, are about the geoengineering and the epigenetic, the environmental aspect of it, how it was all set up. And then I go on to the second part of the book where I talk about the smart city, which is really an armed city. It's an armed technological center in which humans can be experimented on and controlled. And then the third part of the book is where I get into the genetics, optogenetics, epigenetics, et cetera, and the so-called vaccinations, which are really not vaccinations at all, but are gene therapy, gene manipulation, inoculations. It's long. It's my intent was, I made a great table of contents so that people can see, okay, now today I'm really interested in the geoengineered fires. Elana says that they're all geoengineered now. I think I'll read that chapter today and see what that says. You don't have to go, because I'm repeating and resonating throughout the book certain primary concepts so that you understand, yeah, that this concept is attached to this too. Yeah, this concept holds true over here too. 5G, yeah, it's here. In your biology, yes, it's here. It's everywhere, because they have used these technological approaches to control over humanity. And that totally makes sense, that you would use technology to control humanity and all of life, actually, not just humans.
Yeah, and it's invisible. So, they have plausible deniability constantly. It's like, well, what are you talking about? What's in the air? Well, I haven't seen anything. And people that see, we've been seeing chemtrails since the mid 90s. And now people just assume that, planes just make these things and, that's just a natural occurrence of jet engines or whatever. But nothing could be farther from the truth. Modern jet engines do not create what they call contrails or chemtrails. And, all of these things we've been so dumbed down over the years. And of course, another thing that people are just finally starting to realize, I believe, is that the media is totally in cahoots with all these people that want to own and control us in the world. And we have to understand that, like you said, it's not time anymore to sit back and watch what's going on. This is war. This is spiritual war. This is good versus evil. And we're not messing around anymore. This is serious stuff. They've invaded every part of our lives from, every angle that you can possibly imagine, from the family all the way up to institutions and schools and religions. And I mean, it's everywhere. So the masses of humanity have lost their moral compass, if they ever had one. Morality, was taken out of schooling a long time ago. So we get this situation culturally where it's like, hey, whatever's good for me is good for me, and everybody else can, just do their thing and worry about getting theirs because I got mine, kind of attitude. And that is absolutely the worst thing that we're up against now, is that people do not understand what's happening right now. They do not understand the depth of what's happening. And your books so clearly explain all of that. And it's just not speculation. You have you have all the research material backed up and everything. And this is the kind of thing that I want people to understand. And we've talked about it many times in this show, is that the world is not what the mainstream media wants us to think it is. That's a fairy tale that they've created to sort of, just give us a mindset that we'll create for them. I guess you could put it that way. In the collective consciousness of all of our thoughts and ideas moving out into the ether and creating the world, they're controlling what we're creating for them, and that's a huge problem. So if we don't raise our consciousness and see the game for what it is and see what's really happening as opposed to what we're being told is happening, then it's going to be all over. And we don't want it to be that way, because as human beings, we are far more powerful than most people realize.
Absolutely, Jimmy.
Yeah, and the main thing is, it's so simple how we defeat this. We don't cooperate with it. It's that simple. Everybody understand that if they tell you you have to do this jab or wear this mask, and you say, 300 million people in the US say, no, not doing it, it's over. It's over at that point. So that's how we take back our power. We spend our money on local mom and pop shops. These are the ways that we defeat this whole thing. It's very simple. It's not complex. We don't have to get violent. We don't have to take up arms against anybody, because that's not a good game plan, because their weaponry is far superior to anything we could ever imagine.
Well, yeah, and that in that light, I have to say that you may not be entirely right about just not complying, because these weapons are very sophisticated in that they can pulse frequencies to individuals or populations that change behavior, change thoughts, change emotions. So the people who are complying, I noticed that a lot of them, I don't know if you remember there are now and then, I don't go looking on the net, everybody sends me stuff and I have to go through all that. So I've seen a few videos where people are about to go for their second jab, say, for example, and they're all excited and it's wonderful and they're so excited. And you go, that's not really natural, what I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
And so could it be that they're being pulsed with a happy frequency to feel a way that they would not normally feel, but because they're sort of not very conscious as a lifestyle, they don't really retain their consciousness very strongly. They can be pulled this way and that and this way and that. And that's so huge. I live in a place where I would say, if I were to have an educated guess, I would say that the people here are being pulsed with a compliance, complacency, everything's fine, nothing's out of order frequency, where it's just business as usual, and you don't talk about it, and you talk about silly, giddy, stupid things when you're with people in, say, a restaurant or something. And everybody assiduously ignores the elephant in the living room. So I want to give people the benefit of the doubt that, yeah, Americans have been programmed with the TV and iPhones for decades. And I don't own either. I've never owned either. I knew they were weapon systems. Even this computer that I need for my writing and research, I know it's a weapon system. I'm very aware of that. And it even attacks me now and then. I don't know if everybody else has this problem, but I'll get hit in the chest with literal radiation. I can feel it. It sort of makes my saliva glands overproduce just before it happens. And then I have a clenching around my lungs and heart. And at that point, I leap up and I run outside and I start breathing regular air.
And ground yourself.
And if I didn't live on the second floor, I'd go out on the earth and I would ground myself. Exactly. So So it's a weapon system, but the programming of people is so deep that all they need to do now is sort of tweak it from a distance, and that's why I say to people who say, "What can we do? What can we do?" Okay, the first thing we have to do is to sort of deprogram ourselves, look at our lifestyle, figure out our relationship with the technology in our lives, minimize it, no matter if it means less entertainment or less fast movies or whatever the nonsense is. Um, if you insist upon owning an iPhone, which has all sorts of apps you don't even know about, you don't even know about the apps in these things. These are military weapon systems. Get it straight. Then how are you going to live with that so that it doesn't become your mortal enemy? You're going to have to figure out, I mean, first of all, the iPhones, maybe a flip phone would be good enough for emergencies, for, whatever. Everybody has a story about why they can't give up their iPhone. But I really highly suggest you get rid of it, get rid of the TV. It's not just the programming that's the problem, not just the newscasts that are all lies. It's the technology of the HD TVs, the plasma screen, whatever it is. The technology is so sophisticated, so extraordinarily sophisticated. You turn your TV off, it's not off. Same thing as your iPhone. It's not off. The microphone is working. The video features are working. The subliminals are working. So get it straight. You don't know anything about the sophistication of this technology. And until you do, protect yourself, defend yourself, and definitely defend your children. So it's kind of like going to sleep in a technological wonderland, like America is considered to be. And then you wake up in a nightmare. Yeah. I mean, that's really what it is. So to have a book like this, where you can read about the technology, for example, in the smart cities section, I talk extensively about the smart hospital. I tell you every single machine that's in there, and I tell you what it's really doing. I mean, you need to know these are dual use weapon systems. That's all they are. They're telling you they're making you healthy. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. You don't know what they're going to do with you once you check in there. You don't know who on staff has been bought and sold. I mean, this is the problem, and why I have been a natural foods person since the 60s. I'm a 60s holdover here, still alive, yay. In the 60s, we were all experimenting with food. We were growing organic vegetables. We would have long house meetings about, whether the frying pan could be used for meat and vegetables, or if it simply had to be just vegetables. We were very serious about getting rid of the institutional medicine, getting rid of the institutions in general, which we called the establishment. We didn't trust the establishment. Were we right? Oh, yes, we were right.
Absolutely
and
right.
It's just taken a long time for the collapse to begin. But I have always retained the values. I studied Chinese medicine. I haven't been to a doctor since I was 13, which was only just the guy saw a chance to make a couple of $100 off of an appendicitis that wasn't even an appendicitis. I've known for a long time that it's a setup. And I invite everyone to have the adventure of taking full responsibility for their health. Who made you think you can't? You have an immune system. Well, at least the unvaccinated have an immune system. I don't know anymore about the inoculated, because I know what the intention of the mRNA delivery system is. So let's use our immune system. Let's eat for our immune system. Let's protect our immune system. It's like the spiritual corollary to the higher self. That's what it is. And they have done nothing but assault the immune system for the last half century. And I point all that out in the book. I make it very clear. I make no apologies for all I know. And I've got a bazillion footnotes. You can ignore the footnotes if you're not going to do more research. It's overwhelming. The case is before us and has been for decades. but we've been distracted. We've been, that they know how to handle the American psyche and the psyche of others as well, it seems. But I'm most familiar with America.
Yeah, and literally, we've been attacked in every aspect of our lives, from the chemtrails to the fluoride in the water to glyphosate, which is now in the entire food supply everywhere, and that's a endocrine disruptor. I mean, all these ailments, and now everybody's glucose intolerant or lactose intolerant, or you name it, some kind of intolerant. But a lot of this is based on the chemicals that we've ingested that have destroyed our endocrine systems and our ability to
and gender confusion,
yeah,
Jimmy.
gender confusion. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So this always brings up the question, who are they? Who are these? Are they human? Are they some kind of AI hybrid, something transhuman, something or other? Have they been around for thousands of years, millions of years? Are they because they certainly don't seem anything like human beings, because human beings would never, and I mean never, do something like this to the rest of the population. There would never be any wars if humans were running things. Governments start every war. All the worst things that have ever happened to humans have been as a result of these so-called elite leaders, whatever you want to, whether they're the bankers, the military industrial complex, warmongers. I mean, they all seem to be of the same ilk of having no compassion, no care, no love, no humanity, no ability to appreciate the arts or anything like that, because it's all about power, manipulation, and control with them. So it begs the question, who or what are they? You got any ideas on
Oh
that?
no, I've got a lot of ideas on that, because number one, we are living in a time, and I'm thrilled to be here to be present for this. I knew it was coming, but I didn't think that I would be here, and I'm happy about that, even though it's hard and difficult and scary and all those things. Okay, so we are living in a time of the creation now on a mass scale of a hybrid human being. And the hybrid will be the first transhuman that is made. And that's going on right now. So you can look at the patents and see that hybrid human beings, or transhumans, as they're also called in patents, will not qualify for human rights. They will simply not qualify. So bring any legal case, and if in that so-called human being, the one with the head and a torso and two arms and two legs, if has some sort of proof within it that it is no longer carrying a human genome, and that will be the end of a human rights case against Pfizer or AstraZeneca. It doesn't matter, any of those big pharma people. All right. So that said, we're living in a time of the creation of transhumans. I spent a long time, about 10 years, studying MK Ultra, and I know quite a few MK Ultras. Those who don't know the term, I do meet people who've never even heard the term. Wow, I thought, no, were you raised under a bushel or what?
Yeah, well, Kathy O'Brien was on the show just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So MK Ultra was the CIA mind control programs, 149 sub projects from 1953 to 1973. Now, in 73, at the Church Committee, the CIA claimed that they no longer were running it. Okay, that was kind of true. They were running something different, and it was what I call EMK Ultra. So the E standing for electronic. The mind control programs that we inherited from the Nazis, that we brought over under Operation Paperclip, protected them for all their lives, and we now protect their children and their grandchildren. This was the pretty much the beginning of the end of the United States of America. And the MK Ultra that we got from the Nazis, who had done a great deal of experiments in the camps, We then developed further with the technology that that the whole Cold War, which was a ruse, the whole Cold War was dedicated to, was to make it seem like Soviet Russia was against us when really we were supporting them to the tune of billions of dollars for 72 years, while they too developed weaponry that we were developing. So all those lies, yes, 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 that's the way it is. And the ability of the mind control uh, to take over in America was so obvious to them. And so they moved a TV into every living room. Then it was into every bedroom. And then they're giving TVs away. And everything sort of ended up there where people were still human, but they were in alpha wave all the time, because you sit down and start watching a television program or a YouTube. I'm not all for YouTubes because people aren't reading. They're just not reading anymore. So Elana, why do you write all these books? Well, for the future. I write them for the future. When they go, what the hell happened back then? There will be these little books that try to tell the truth. And that's my hope. Anyway, so we're still human. As far as those who are running the MK Ultra programs and own the TV, RCA, et cetera, from the very beginning, are they human? It's a good question, because the practices, as I studied MK Ultra, I studied a great deal about dynastic families, as they're called. These families that for sure sit on huge corporate boards. And this is intergenerational. It isn't like it was all back then and now their kids are different. No, because the way the global elite raise their children is entirely different from how the lower classes raise their children. For one, their children don't watch television. Their children don't spend hours on iPhones. Their children are not allowed to go their merry way. They are programmed from the cradle to the grave. And so very different people, very different species from ours. As far as what happens to you in that programming, say you're in a global elite family, big pharma family, like the ones I read about in the Belgian crisis that happened back in the 90s, called the Dutroux affair. It was when a pedophile similar to Epstein was picked up, and it was discovered that he was kidnapping kids and delivering them to castles for satanic rituals. And so they caught him. And then when they began to investigate in Belgium, this would be in Brussels, 1 million citizens came out into the streets, a whole million. And they were they should have had pitchforks in their hands. They
Yeah.
had it with the elite taking their children for centuries. Centuries they have taken children from the lower classes. And so there was one inspector who was really doing his job and really pushing in there. And of course, they killed him. And then everything got buried. But those kinds of people, what happens to them at those rituals? Now, this is where it gets kind of, that line between spiritual and material. We like to think there's a big black line there, and spiritual's over here with the religious institutions. And then over here, you have the scientific institutions. Well, it doesn't quite work that neat and tidy, because many of these very technically minded, very science-minded elites are also steeped in occultism. They are steeped in, I think a lot of them read Rudolf Steiner just to find out exactly how the good side is thinking through him. And then they have that much more information of how they can do their dirty deeds and turn things. So the occult is a huge part of what's going on right now. And every time someone mentions it, I want everybody to self-observe and see if there's a part of them I've seen it in front of me, but maybe not in all of you, is that you watch yourself and somebody mentioned something occult, like Elana mentioned something, and right away you feel this sort of sleep come over you. It's like it's a deer in the headlights moment, and you kind of aren't interested, you see, and you don't believe that, so you end up over here. So there's some sort of conditioning in us that prevents us from adding up the whole picture. We're kept in half the picture, not even half anymore, maybe an eighth of the picture, and then the rest is commercials, ads, entertainment, sitcoms, more movies coming out, more
Sports.
scandals, sports.
Yeah.
We're
Distractions.
just to watch yourself, because you have been programmed. There is no question in my mind. So because you have the programming, when you bring up a question of what is human, we're in a very twilight zone now, because they look human, but I actually feel I am meeting people now, even in my small town, who are not fully human anymore. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean that they're aliens. I don't mean it's Alpha Centauri. I don't mean it's reptilians. What I mean is they have somehow sold their birthright to their true humanity. And what is true humanity? So I have to define what I mean by that. To me, true humanity, which I attempt to embody, truthfully, in every fiber of my being, I attempt to be a true human being, is someone who's moral, someone who tells the truth, who loves the truth, who wants to serve all of humanity, because I am a human being and I owe that to my race. My race, according to Rudolf Steiner, is a very high hierarchy, a divine being living in a material body, in a material world, and attempting to bring the good, the true, and the beautiful to a realm that has belonged to all sorts of entities for millions of years. And I am trying to live as a human being here. So this is very much admired in spiritual worlds. And there are many different spiritual worlds, as the quantum physics attempts to tell us. There are many frequencies to this universe. And some of those frequencies are anti-human. And some of those frequencies are pro-human and are rooting for our developing our free will and bringing the good, the true, and the beautiful into a material realm. So that's my cosmology. And that isn't something I just do on Sundays or something like that. That's every day, every minute. That's who I am. I just told you everything important about me to know who I am. And that's probably why so many people love me without even having met me. So that, all that said, Jimmy, sorry to give such a big preamble, but are they human? I don't think so. I think what happens is they abandon at their childhood. They're tortured, they're raped, they're treated terribly in order to prepare them for handling the reins of power by their elite so-called parents and families and whatever, and they're sort of stuck there. They're sort of stuck in that. And then many of them take the persona on, and they're watched very carefully, and they have to obey a lot of those tenets. They have no freedom, is what I'm saying. They have none. Klaus Schwab, he has no freedom. You and I have freedom because we're unimportant, but we can still lose our humanity. And to me, the big point here is whatever is living in them, because nature abhors a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum. That means that when they abandon their humanity, an entity or maybe a whole legion of entities move into them. And now this person can be culled and used by the cults that prescribe satanic ritual abuses, satanic rituals in their religion. And these are real religions. They have a belief in a certain kind of God. They believe they have rites, they have rituals, they're awful and they're horrible, and you and I don't want to be at them. But this is who they are, and then entities are definitely involved with them. Can an entity be involved in a church or a temple? Yes, it can. Of course it can. The important part is the human soul. The soul is the place where they work. And so if you have a place that's not a church or a temple that's not properly taken care of by someone who knows how this all lines up, the good versus evil, the war in heaven, etc. If you have someone who's irresponsible, or someone who's a pedophile, or someone who's, on the take somehow, well, then the whole church may go. The whole church may go. That's what leadership is all about. It's about being what you want your people to do and be. That's the whole thing. So that's kind of where we're at. And for the institutions, I've never been an institution joiner. I'm not comfortable in institutions. But I also wanted to share with you a term that I use that is from the occult. It was told to me by an Italian man when I was living in London years ago. And he told me this term. He had worked in the Vatican for 20 some years. And he said that what happens in institutions is an egregore takes it over, an egregore. Egregore. And what an egregore is, it's not some, reptilian from Alpha Centauri. It's actually the composite of all the souls that have fallen and are completely vacant of humanity. It's that. And now the egregore becomes of one will. I mean, I always think of Lockheed Martin myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm dealing all the time with Lockheed Martin technology.
Yeah, you can't get much more evil than that company. Maybe
yeah.
Bear and
well, no, there's a lot of them, but that's probably the king,
Big Pharma.
The king evil. But the institutions are the problem in America. We're run by institutions, and people work for institutions, and I don't know if they've noticed, but there's no one to hold responsible. Who are you going to hold responsible? You're going to go and complain. First of all, you're never going to get through to them.
Even if you're able to bring charges or attempt to bring charges, right, the corruption goes all the way through the judicial system. And these, people that have sold their souls for fame and power and glory, whatever they perceive that they're getting out of it. And so that's what we're seeing right now. There's no accountability for these people. And it can come straight out in your face and say, okay, here's the evidence. Here's what's occurred. Yeah. Here's what these people did. And it's like it just goes poof into the ether. And
that's right. And
nothing ever happens.
And that's a spiritual moment. People don't recognize it. They think it's just, well, that's how it is. The law is like that. No, that's a spiritual moment where you just saw an evil spiritual moment of the egregore, one egregore scratching the back and saving another egregore. I'm telling you, this concept is very useful, and use it so that you can be clear on staying human. I think that's the main thing now, Jimmy, is we really have to look at what being human is. And I think that's one of the good things coming out of this now is that's not human. I'm human. Am I human? If I'm cheating on my wife, if I'm taking a little from the till, or, all these things, just ask yourself, am I still human? I mean, that's the important part, is to remain human, not just to be a paragon of morality as people will see you, though you're not, but to be it, to be what you present. This is the human way. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think I agree with that. And I see it as being fully conscious and aware of who you are as a divine being, inhabiting a physical body in this realm to experience. So understand, number one, that's what's occurring here. You're not just an ego bouncing around off the walls, being programmed by the media. No, you need to connect with that higher being that you really are, not the lower level ego that we all use for defensive purposes or whatever, but the higher being and becoming an authentic human being, and that's recognizing your divinity. And that's why I always feel like consciousness, or what people refer to
Yes.
as higher consciousness, is so important, because if you have that awareness, you see what's really going on. You are able to discern the difference between what you're saying is human and humanity and what is not. And right now, the preponderance of what's being thrust on us is not human. It's not humanity. We're being run by freaking demons and who else, who knows what else out there,
Yes.
who are not human. So it's time for us to stand up as human beings and quit cowering, quit,
Yeah.
going along with the program, being afraid of what others will think, getting away from the herd mentality and standing up for ourselves as human beings, as divine beings,
Yes.
right?
Yes. That's it, Jimmy. I mean, that's the greatest thing I could say. And if you read the book, a lot of people think, oh, Ilana's so good at technology. Well, if you read between the lines, I'm speaking as a divine being the whole way through the book. Let
Absolutely.
me tell you, it's my hope to touch the spirit of all human beings so that they might defend themselves and prepare for, and I died in a wave when I was 22. I don't want to go into that story, but I died, and it was the tunnel, and it was the light at the end of the tunnel, and the whole thing. And I was like, I came back from it, and I was like, wow, that's that's pretty good. I felt like I was going through into another room, that actually I was kind of depressed that I hadn't continued into that room, because I
And
was
couldn't come.
brought
Yeah, you
back.
had to come back, right?
I had to come back to do something, and obviously I had a lot of work to do. Yeah.
And you're doing it, and we so appreciate what you're doing, and your
Yeah.
contribution is so important. So tell people where they can find you, where they can find your books, and I will also put in links down below in the description. This will be on several different platforms, so in each one we'll put the description. But go ahead and tell us.
Okay, so you can get the first two books if you want to go back and go through everything before this book at Feral House, or you can get it at Amazon.
Can you spell Feral House?
Yeah, Feral, as in animal.
Okay.
And then for this book, I'm having trouble with Amazon. I'll put it up front, but I think in another week it might be resolved. I've bought a new ISBN, and maybe this will resolve the problem. We'll see. And then you can also order a color edition, because those are black and white. It was too cost prohibitive to do the books in color. It would have been a fortune for normal people to pay. So there is a lovely Rudolf Steiner bookstore in Seattle that has volunteered to do the work, to send out color editions from a printer that we're buying the books from,
Oh, wow.
so that people can have it for about $55. And remember, it's 690 pages. You're getting your money's worth, believe me. And then that Rudolf Steiner bookstore, that's the name of it, Seattle, Washington. You can find it. And then there's always my site, elanafreeland.com, which is my blog site run by my wonderful web mistress, who's done fantastic work there to make it beautiful and informative. And that, the powers that be are always taking things down from.
Gee, that's how you're telling the truth, and you're right on target, right?
Yeah, you do.
When you
Yeah, you
become the target of the evil archy, as I like to refer to them as. So anyway, Elana Freeland, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. We so appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see all of you inside the Matrix.